So Sketch Community held at Lauriston Primary School was an amazing opportunity to show what I've been able to develop, and it was an opportunity afforded to me by Jim and Gary, who run an amazing program called A Bigger Picture. They invite artists to the school to put on exhibitions in like a beautiful little gallery space next to the art, attached to the art shed, and the kids are brought in to sort of look at a professional art practice and then respond to it. There's also a lot of interaction between the artists and the kids, so there'll be little workshops. I had a charming few days working with the kids, making little clay sculptures and figurines and things, and we started off again making the pinch pots and then moved slowly into sculpture, and it was amazing how fast they grasped the processes, you know, starting from something as simple as modelling to something as complicated as sort of grafting things onto each other. What seemed to be the most popular form after mugs was Minecraft pigs. There were a lot of Minecraft pigs, but they were very sweet. And there was even a little kiln in the shed, so we could fire them up to like earthenware temperatures, beautiful slick glaze. It was really, really nice. And they'll be having an exhibition after mine, sort of mimicking my format. So there'll be ceramic opposite drawings of their community, which Jim gave them the task of doing. And it was really amazing watching them sort of draw people from memory, but also drawing each other, and the interactions that allowed, you know, like it's anything from like quite a teasing to quite a friendly gesture. So yeah, it was an amazing experience, and I think A Bigger Picture is doing really cool things for the school. The kids seem to love it, and they're really just, I'm surprised at how fast they are on the uptake. It was amazing. So Sketch for Community was a solo exhibition I recently did at the Lauriston School by Victoria Park. It was a selection of the past 8 months of work which I made at Toninger Ceramics in Hoxton. It was all, except for a few pieces, in porcelain, with a bit of printmaking thrown in. The printmaking was done at London Print Studio in Ladbroke Grove, which I did a sort of a 6-week stint at last year, which was really amazing. But I was really interested in how I could explore the notion of community by using objects. Having moved to London 3 years ago to do my master's in art history at Christie's Education, I found myself suddenly without community and sort of being in a new place where I had to generate these new relationships. And I wanted to, after 3 years of that process happening, index and document those relationships, individual specific relationships, which is what I've done through my portraiture, and then also to perhaps look at the structure community can take by placing objects next to each other. And that's how I see the pots acting. I've been using the ceramics I've been making over the past 8 months at Turning Earth to act as placeholders to explore that structure. And one of the structures I'm really happy with and think has worked quite well as an installation. That was a total surprise to me. You know, when you're setting up a show, the space almost dictates the structure of the exhibition. And so in setting up, this thing emerged, and it got the name taxonomy because it felt a bit like a biological diagram, like a family tree of sorts, a naming process, where each shelf represented a different process that the pot was undergoing. But it also showed the progress of the pot from the simplest organism, simplest object, through to the most complicated, and the steps it took along like an evolutionary chain of processes to get to the final product. The final thing I had made before the show started, it's kind of like, it's the state of the art at the moment, kind of frozen in time. And what was really interesting was next to this installation there was a sort of like blank wall space, and I feel like that almost had the most interest for me because it was empty. There was like, it could talk about what was going to happen next. That taxonomy itself worked on multiple levels. It worked on a design development level, so it showed how an object went through a design process, getting more and more complicated with more and more processes being added to it. So starting with a pinch pot, moving on to pinch pot onto slabbed bodies, then moving on to slab bodies with pinched tops and spouts, and then the final shelf being teaching myself how to throwing the bases and adding the pinch pots to those, finally resulting in like a beautiful porcelain tulip vase. So while taxonomy as a wall piece was interested in like a more general micro-macro structure situation, the portraits were kind of more of an immediate indexing of my personal relationships with people. So they start to map out my immediate community, starting with people at the pottery at Turning Earth, where I made the work for the past 8 months, and then moving into sort of other personal relationships, and then linked to that, but separated by an image of Bernard Leach, who is the initiator of my tradition of studio pottery, which is an Anglo-Oriental tradition. Are the potters who, coming from Bernard Leach, allowed studio pottery to exist in Cape Town, South Africa, where I'm from. So I suppose I was trying to map with those sketches my own heritage as a potter, and trace back my lineage to Bernard Leach, discovering all these amazing characters along the way, like Tim Morris and Michael Cardew, and Isaiah Bosch, and Jaime Binovitz. So it's been a nice exercise sort of finding out where I'm from, and also perhaps where I fit into something historically. And I suppose that's why this exhibition needed to happen at this time. It feels a bit like a full stop at the end of a paragraph, having been in London for 3 years now. So I first came into contact with pottery when I visited my stepmother, who had a kiln in her garage, and I suppose to sort of maybe just keep me busy, or maybe because she saw how interested I was in this sort of very strange material, she taught me how to make a little bird. So we made a little pinch pot, stuck a head on it, stuck a tail on it, painted it like gaudy reds and greens, and suddenly it was a thing. And I think that sort of that hand building experience, and that composite experience of putting things together to make a new object has really stuck with me. And to this day, I'm 16 years later, I'm still pinching pots. It's like the first thing you learn. I've taken the first thing I've learned and taken it to an extreme, and I still haven't exhausted it. There's so much more I can do with pinching, with hand building, with composite works, with bringing different processes together. So that's really exciting. But then after that, I started going to a pottery class once a week with a woman called Jennifer Frantisek at her studio, Dawn Time Pottery in Sakai in South Africa. And I was with her for like 9 years, from like 9 to 18. She was like an amazing woman who made some very beautiful things. And she also had like this amazing ability to just care about people. So it was really lovely being with her. And that's kind of my grounding in ceramics. But I also did it in high school. I did it in high school as a separate subject, as well as art history, which was great because it means I didn't have time for sport, and sport was mandatory in my school, so I managed to get out of the one thing no one else can get out of, which was great. And then after school I did a 5-year apprenticeship with an amazing porcelain artist called John Bauer. He taught me a lot about the material. I almost work exclusively in porcelain now, but also about just like hard work, just working 12-hour days because you have to get an order out. I helped him produce his order for anthropology, which was an incredible learning experience. Just the quality, it's amazing being able to mass hand produce a very high quality product, but making enough of it so that it's more accessible to a larger public. And I think that that's what ceramic really has above other mediums, is that it has this middle point between art, design and craft and even architecture. And because it's a material and not a discipline, it can jump in between any of those parts. So that's kind of what I'm looking forward to in the next few months, is moving maybe away from one area, moving slightly into another, maybe going into product design a bit more strongly. But whenever I go into product design, it always just sort of falls somehow back into an art practice, which is what has happened with this show. It started off as a desire to make bottles for a friend of mine who's making delicious liqueurs, and it became like a giant exhibition about feelings. So it all kind of comes together in the end. One thing I'm kind of hoping to execute in the next month or so is a show called Gift, and Gift is about my interest in making work specifically for people. I think it's very beautiful if you can customize something to a friend to like an nth degree. They don't even know, like you've customized it to a point, like past the point they're even aware of, and it just sort of goes into like a whole nother level. And that's what I kind of I really enjoy doing. So for instance, there's a friend of mine who's a weaver who his coffee mugs keep falling off his machine because there's just so much vibration in the loom. So I'm kind of thinking maybe chunky ass coffee mug, maybe with some magnets, so it just sticks onto his machine so it doesn't move. And then of course, my friend Mikey makes most amazing liqueurs and is now working for this great distilling company. So it would be nice to formalize some bottles for him, maybe get some sort of embossing stamps going on. But I think a little show called Gift, where like I display the work, again indexing my relationships, displaying work I've made for people, and then inviting them to the space to collect their gift would be a really nice thing to do. It also kind of draws on my anthropology training and looking at Malinowski's gift economies, which I think is a really important work and explains a lot of what's happening in today's world, especially with social media, and then the implications of being followed, having to follow, promoting one person as a way of promoting yourself. That kind of interconnectedness was written about like 40 years ago, and it's just as relevant now.